This, of course, Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Eben Janssen. The show is live and it's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with our whole show available on our YouTube channel all of the time. Well, today we're, of course, back in North Gauteng High Court as the Oscar Pistorius trial resumes. We also take a look at today's looming strike here in South Africa. And then a bit later we look at a very contentious issue called fracking, shale gas exploration, in depth. First though, Katrine gives us a news update.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Katrine Malan and let's take a look at the news headlines. The state will today begin its cross-examination of an acoustics expert who testified in the trial of murder-accused Oscar Pistorius. The expert, Ivan Lynn, gave a report on ambient noise on the morning Pistorius shot dead his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp. Yesterday, psychiatric evaluation reports read in court confirmed the Paralympian's criminal liability for the death. The trial resumed yesterday following Pistorius' month-long psychiatric evaluation. Thousands of members of the National Union of Metal Workers are expected to down tools today. Metro Police have advised motorists to steer clear of downtown Johannesburg this morning due to the planned NUMSA march. Union members are also expected to march in Durban, Port Elizabeth, George, Cape Town and East London today. Over 200,000 workers are seeking a 12% wage hike across the board, a R1,000 housing allowance increase and demanding the scrapping of labour brokers. The price of petrol will increase by 29 cents from midnight tonight due to changes in crude oil prices, the rand-dollar exchange rate and prices of finished products. The 29 cents a litre increase is for 93 unleaded and there will be a 31 cents a litre increase for 95 unleaded. The diesel price will go up 14 cents a litre. In international news, US President Barack Obama has condemned the killings of 3 kidnapped Israeli teenagers whose bodies were found in a field late yesterday afternoon in the southern West Bank. Israel has launched more than 30 airstrikes against Hamas military installations in Gaza following the discovery of the bodies. A Hamas spokesman has warned against escalation. Then in your World Cup action, Germany and France will meet in the World Cup for the first time in 28 years after each advanced to the quarterfinals in Brazil. France defeated Nigeria 2-0 on a pair of late goals yesterday before Germany beat Algeria 2-1 after extra time. The quarterfinal lineup will be completed today when Argentina plays Switzerland in Sao Paulo and Belgium take on the US in Salvador. Remember, all these headline stories are available on our Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thanks again, Katrine. Now, the state will begin its cross-examination of sound expert Ivan Lynn when the Oscar Pistorius murder trial resumes in the North Gauteng High Court this morning. Yesterday, State Prosecutor Gerrie Nel requested an early adjournment so that he could analyse Lynn's technical report of sound level noise tests. For the very latest, we now go to our reporter, Griselda Lewis, who's been quite busy this morning. I notice you've been doing the updates on Morning Live this morning. Griselda, very good morning to you.
Well, a very good morning to you, Eben.
Busy. Just tell us what we can expect then today, Griselda.
Well, Eben, as you rightly pointed out, that we're expecting the cross-examination of the acoustics engineer Ivan Lynn. Today we saw him give testimony yesterday about the difference between the screams of a woman and a man. You would know, of course, that emanates from the previous state witnesses' testimonies that they heard the screams of a woman coming from Oscar Pistorius' home on the morning that he shot and killed Riva Steenkamp. So basically what Ivan Lynn is here to do is to also indicate that the state witnesses who indicated that they heard screams coming from the home of Oscar Pistorius live 177 meters away from Oscar Pistorius' home. So basically what he is saying is that there's absolutely no way that you're able to tell the screams from as far as 177 meters away from Oscar Pistorius' home. And certainly what he's saying is that you'll also be able to differentiate between the voices of a man and a woman, but of course without exception. So Ivan Lynn, we're expecting his cross-examination to get underway this morning, and for Gerrie Nel to try and poke holes into his testimony. We saw yesterday already where Gerrie Nel was questioning whether he was qualified to speak on issues of whether Oscar Pistorius was able to, for example, or rather not Oscar Pistorius, but some of the witnesses, if they were able to hear the sound coming from Oscar Pistorius' home. And we saw basically there Lynn sticking to his guns and saying that from that distance it would be highly unlikely that one would be able to hear the screams of a woman or a man.
Griselda, just to sort of recap what yesterday as well, I saw some media reports talking about his stumps and how Dr. Versfeld, his testimony sort of shot him in the foot, for lack of a better word.
Well, that's right, Eben. You know, certainly you can see it was very embarrassing for Oscar Pistorius to remove his prosthetic legs, and we could not see much from the gallery and where we are, and of course that part was not televised at all. But we could see when Judge Thokozile Masipa and her two assessors were brought down from the bench as Dr. Gerald Versfeld was demonstrating or explaining to them why it would be so difficult for Oscar Pistorius to be on his limbs, and why mobility is such a challenge when he takes off his prosthetic legs. You know, I was looking in particular as well at Oscar Pistorius' sister, Amy Pistorius, who, has often showed much emotion when she sees that Oscar Pistorius is not doing well. It certainly looked like Oscar Pistorius had closed his eyes as Dr. Versfeld was giving an account of, the tissue surrounding Oscar Pistorius' limbs and how it would be painful every time the heel pad moves back, and that, why Oscar Pistorius would find difficulty, for example, in the dark, moving around on his stumps. But we saw also yesterday Gerrie Nel also digging into that and questioning why Dr. Versfeld would basically say that, because it would certainly look like on the day of the shooting that Oscar Pistorius on his limbs was able to go and get a cricket bat and the weapon that he used to shoot and kill Reeva Steenkamp, and at some point bring in fans as well. And we know that according to Oscar Pistorius' version of events, that he did not switch on the light because he said he was afraid to do so. So really the state questioning the evidence or the testimony given by Dr. Versfeld that mobility was a challenge, yet Oscar Pistorius could maneuver so much in the dark on the day that he shot and killed Reeva Steenkamp.
Thank you very much, Griselda Lewis, the busiest young lady in South African broadcasting. There she is. She'll keep you updated on this very channel, how things develop throughout the next day. Also, of course, just to recap, the state will today begin its cross-examination of an acoustics expert who testified in the trial of murder-accused Paralympian Oscar Pistorius. The expert, Ivan Lynn, gave a report on ambient noise on the morning Pistorius shot dead his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp. The trial resumed yesterday following Pistorius' month-long psychiatric evaluation. State prosecutor Gerrie Nel told the court that the evaluation had found Pistorius did not suffer mental defects that could influence his behavior. Later in proceedings, his disability came under the spotlight once again. His doctor took to the stand and gave graphic detail of the athlete's hardships as an amputee. Dr. Gerald Versfeld, who amputated Pistorius' legs when he was 11 months old, said Pistorius had less mobility on his stumps and was more vulnerable to falling in the dark. Big story here in South Africa. The looming strike by Metal Workers Union of South Africa, NUMSA, will cost companies in the engineering and steel sector millions of rands in daily revenue. More than 220,000 NUMSA members are expected to down tools today. They're demanding a 12% wage increase across the board. The union has rejected employers' offer of between 7 and 8%. Yesterday, NUMSA met with Labour Minister Mildred Oliphant to discuss a number of collective bargaining issues. The meeting was also an attempt to find a solution to the looming strike. Now for the latest, we are joined in studio by NUMSA Wits Central West Regional Secretary, Mr. Sizwe Dlamini, to tell us what the very latest is. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
Very, very good. So just tell us what's the latest and what position are we in? Have we started the strike this morning?
We have actually started the strike. The issues are, at the core of it, are wage-related matters as well as non-wage-related matters. And with wage-related matters, we have the wage as a major issue and core demand. We were actually at 12. The 12% that you mentioned, it's part of our compromise to seek to reach a settlement. And some of our compromises also are around the issue of family responsibility leave, the issue of annual leave, the issue of sick leave that employees are actually demanding. But at the major core of our demand is that we are still dealing with the colonial wage structure in our country, which has refused to die. Quietly, we are still experiencing the apartheid wage gap that has persisted since 1994. It has not changed at all costs.
It's true that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world, but do you think the solution is in hurting the economy more by strike after strike after strike that's crippling the economy, that's going to cost your members jobs in the end?
Your question is much relevant, but I think it can better be understood in the following light. When employers were engaged since May this year, since March this year, they have refused to completely meet us halfway in terms of our demand. We started negotiations with them as early as March. Up until today, they only moved during the course of the dispute when it was clear that the wage negotiations have actually deadlocked. And the wage demand that NUMSA has put on the table is something that is affordable in the country's economy. It's something that employers in the metal and engineering industry can actually afford. The lowest paid worker in the industry, which is going on strike today, is at 30 rand per hour.
Yeah.
And if you look at the earnings of executives and senior level managers, it's high above that. And when you look at the economy, what is creating in this country, it cannot be said it's fair that workers are at the lower end of our economy.
What do you say to those that the timing of your strike is very bad because we've just come out of an extended, the longest strike in the history of South Africa that's really crippled the economy and brought the growth rate of the entire economy down to below 2%. We've just come out of 5 months of strikes that crippled the country, and now we're heading into another one. What do you say to the critics about that?
That is why our opening issue has been that it's a colonial wage structure that we are locked in. If our government and the industry players have moved to close the colonial wage structure, we wouldn't be experiencing this problem. Employers in the industry were well aware that we're in a 3-year agreement since 2011, and they knew that come 2014 we will be engaging in wage negotiations.
Yeah.
So it's not an incident that it happens.
Are you prepared to listen to some other voices and maybe delay this industrial action in order to have more negotiation and discussion, and also then the role of the new Labour Minister in talking with you guys? Can we find a way to talk our way around this?
We are prepared to talk. I know for a fact that our principals had an engagement with the Labour Minister last night, but that should not be misperceived as if NUMSA has run away from negotiations. We are engaging, but as of the 1st of July 2014, there is no industry agreement in the industry. And employers were quite aware that the agreement expired yesterday.
How long are you prepared to go with this action?
As much as our members are not getting a living wage, are not getting a positive response on the demand that I've just mentioned, which is the increase of actually mentioned that the 12% is actually a compromise. We're actually at 15%. The issue of a one-year agreement, the issue of a family responsibility leave, the issue of labor broker, the complete banning of labor broker, which we regard as actually a slavery of its kind in this country. It cannot be tolerated anymore. Other issues include the issue of sick leave. Employees are experiencing problems. Also because employers are not providing medical aids for our members.
Thank you for joining us today. The Regional Secretary, Central West of NUMSA, Mr. Sizwe Dlamini. You're right, we do live in the most unequal society and we need to find ways to discuss this matter going forward, but we also need to find solutions and not always dump our economy into crisis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Just to recap, Metal Union NUMSA is going ahead with its strike in the metal and engineering sectors today. Last-minute intervention by government has failed to prevent a countrywide strike for a 12% salary increase.
All systems go for the 220,000 NUMSA members in the metal industry to down tools. The union is demanding a 12% increase across the board. It's rejected the employer's offer of between 7 and 8%. Economists say more than 10,000 manufacturing companies could be impacted by the strike. They warn that the impact could be far more devastating than the recent platinum mine strike. There are increasing calls for strong, proactive leadership from labor, business and government to reverse the negative sentiment that strikes are sending to the international world.
South Africa seems to be inviting an overarching perception that there is great discord between capitalist and labor, and that is injecting a sense of averseness to risk-taking in South Africa. We may pay for these tensions beyond just the strike activity, but a more longer-term reluctance by capital to invest in South Africa.
NUMSA will hold marches across 6 major cities to press for their demands. Later in the day, it will meet the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of South Africa, the largest employer body in the sector. A glimmer of hope that parties can avert a prolonged strike. Luta Matlogelwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Let's take a look now at what you're talking about on social media, of course. At SABC Newsroom on Twitter, that's where we live. We love your pictures, comments, opinions. And here are some of them today. This NUMSA strike is making me nervous. Hopefully employers are nervous enough to act quickly. We can't afford sinking any further. Yes, Mbini, that's right. That is the absolute fact. The Daz man says, is NUMSA the radical part of COSATU striking to take the headlines off AMCU? Petty, I wouldn't put it past the alliance. We've just heard from Sizwe Dlamini, who said this is a 3-year process that they, at the end of, everyone was quite aware of how this was going to break. They have not taken action. Sean says, Lord, grant us our peace and protection as the unions prepare for a protest march through the streets of our city. Yes, we are all allowed to protest peacefully. Thelma Rusterberg says, NUMSA, please stop destroying lives. All need a living wage, but this is not the way to go. As Sizwe Dlamini pointed out earlier, it's the end of a 3-year process. Richard Owen Thomas says, NUMSA, you've joined AMCU with your strike by shooting yourselves, the poor, the unemployed, and the country in the foot. Everybody loses. Well, Richard, unfortunately, we live in the most unequal society on this planet today. And therein lies the key, I suppose, to our problem and in us finding a solution going forward. Let's try and all work together to make this happen. Let's take a look now what's happening on the front pages of the world. The Vanguard in Nigeria this morning on the news that Nigeria's military has broken up a Boko Haram intelligence cell and arrested its leader, who is alleged to have taken part in the abduction of over 200 teenage girls in April. In the United Kingdom, papers all reporting on Australian entertainer Rolf Harris, who might be facing a jail term after being found guilty of 12 counts of indecently assaulting young girls. Then your sport front pages focusing on Luis Suarez, who's issued an apology to Italian defender Giorgio Chiellini for biting him during a World Cup match. He's vowed never to use the jaws on a football pitch again. We live in hope, yeah? 3 strikes, Luis, and you're out. This is Newsroom. We'll be back after a short commercial break.
we, you ask?
This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house.
As we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
SABC News, we've got Africa covered.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Shale gas exploration continues to be the hype of debate in South Africa, especially after the ruling ANC recently announced that it could be a possible game changer that will benefit the country. On one side, it could mean great economic benefits, but might be at the cost of the environment on the other side. Now, recently, a South African documentary about fracking called Unearthed walked away with the Green Award at the Sheffield International Documentary Festival in the United Kingdom. Before we continue, let's just have a look at a little clip of the documentary.
For a long time, the Karoo was just a forgotten rural area in the middle of South Africa, a place I used to call home.
Dis baie lieflik om eintlik by in die Karoo te kan bly. Wanneer jy jou kind sal 'n koppie water gaan gee, dan weet jy dit wat jy gaan drink, weet jy dit is skoon.
I was never intending to make a film about this. I never saw much value in the Karoo. But recently, multinational corporations have.
They call the process fracking. Water and chemicals under pressure break up rock to get to the elusive natural gas supply.
South Africa is eyeing the opportunity of shale gas exploration in the Karoo.
I would welcome the fracking industry. The Karoo is a delicate, dry place in need of development.
Ons weet in die Karoo is baie mense wat eintlik werk soek.
Every South African will benefit by shale gas development.
Het jy al van fracking gehoor? Soek jy meer inligting?
Ja, ek sal graag wil meer hoor wat dit plan is. Op die TV gewees in Amerika, dan vlam die gas in die water uit.
Are you aware of any documented cases of groundwater contamination being definitively caused by hydraulic fracturing?
No, I'm not.
Sometimes.
Well, that's just a little clip. Of course, we took that off YouTube, and it's doing the rounds. We are joined in our Cape Town studio by the Karoo-born director of that documentary, Jolyn Minna. A very good morning to you, Jolyn.
Eben, good morning. Thank you for having me.
And then here in our studio in Johannesburg, we are joined by Salim Fakir, the head of the Living Planet Unit at the World Wildlife Fund, South Africa. A very good morning to you as well. Salim, if I can start with you and deal with the business side of this matter. Game changer economically in South Africa versus the environmental arguments against it. Your views?
So I think the idea of a game changer, we don't really know. I mean, I think the facts are very uncertain. It is a very tough thing to crack fracking because it's unconventional gas. It's never been done in South Africa, so we don't know whether the price of gas is like it is in the US is really going to be cheap, as people are talking about, and it will revolutionize the energy sector. So there's lots of uncertainty, lots of more work needs to be done. And if you look at Jolyn's documentary, which is an excellent, I just have to commend her on that.
Yeah.
It really gives you the human side of the story, which is often missed, because with fracking, of course, there are some people who benefit, and perhaps people outside of the Karoo are likely to benefit more if it's really truly a game changer in that sense. But the the documentary shows the real human side of it, which is often ignored in this debate.
Let's bring in Jolene and talk about this documentary and what set you on this journey, Jolene, and give us a little bit of that human face that Salim is talking about.
I mean, of course, in the beginning, coming from the Karoo, the investigation was just a personal one to better understand the risks and benefits for the Karoo and the people and the area that I grew up in. And I was quite optimistic about what it could mean for the Karoo, as you could hear in that clip that you just showed. I was then able to go to the US where fracking was developed, the only country that's currently carrying it out. And what I found was in complete contrast, a contradiction to what's been promised to South Africa by the various companies interested in drilling in the Karoo. I found community after community dealing with contaminated water supplies, choking on air pollution. I met with independent scientists, and many of those intimately involved with the development of the fracking technology, desperately seeking to voice their concerns, met with regulatory agencies who are struggling to keep up with the industry and struggling to understand what this technology is, how to best understand it and regulate it and protect the citizens on the ground.
We talk about protecting the citizens on the ground, Jolene, but we also have to look at creating a future for those citizens. We've got strikes all over the country. People are unhappy. We live in the most unequal society in the world, where the rich are very rich and the poor are simply battling to just feed themselves. How do you counterbalance these two things? And how do you look at that if you have a possible game changer that can help in job creation and the like versus the environmental downside, as it were?
You're spot on, and as you saw in that clip, you can't be naive about the realities that South Africa is facing. What I realized about fracking when I was in the US, that the truth is that fracking actually stands to hurt the ones it claims to help the most. That the marginalized communities in rural areas are trying to understand what's just happened to them, trying to understand how to deal with contaminated water supplies, the health costs that have arrived in the communities, the way that the social fabric of those communities have forever been changed by the arrival of foreign workers. So there really is the other side, as Salim was saying, the human side of the story, and trying to understand whether or not that's actually going to benefit those poor communities or make them worse off for it.
Salim, I want to come to you in Johannesburg and talk about the greater good. The principle of the greater good in this universe that we live in says it is okay to kill one to save 100 lives. Does that apply in this process?
Like I said, we don't know. I mean, I think if you look at the track record of 100 years of mining in this country, if you look at the amount of wealth that has been created out of mining, and you look at the deep inequalities that still exist in South Africa, it tells you a narrative that having certain resources doesn't tell you that you're going to resolve and alleviate the kind of poverty that we're beginning to see in South Africa. And that inequality has grown in the last 20 years, by the way. So I think this correlation between vast resources and actual economic development is not something that automatically exists. It's dependent on how the resource is governed, how the wealth that is generated from the resource is distributed within the economy, and what kinds and qualities of jobs that are created. Because this is really the big debate in South Africa. We've had growth in the 2000 to 2005 period, large extent also still persistent high unemployment over 20 years. So that tells you a story that there's something intricately, there's a dynamic in the economy which is about this disparity and the continuity of this disparity.
You're saying in layman's terms that, in South African terms, that white capital is not prepared to share. That's what you're saying.
I don't want to talk about white capital or black capital. I mean, capital itself is now a much more, it's not easy to identify what the color of capital is. But we know the color of money. And we know that money brings power and money favors those who have power. So I think if we have the continued patterns that we see of domination of capital, whether it's black, white, and the exclusive extraction of the wealth for some people without the benefit to other people, and the continuity of that undermines this whole hypothesis that shale gas is for the benefit of everybody in the country.
Just stay there. I just want to finish up with Jolene in Cape Town. Jolene, are you still with us?
Yes.
Just tell us about when South Africans will be able to watch this documentary of yours, and then you've got some big praise and awards and the like, and that's all good and well, but has it inspired any action, the work that you've done?
Absolutely. I think it's, I'm an everyday person who found a story and am now sharing it with the world. And I think that makes it more accessible to more and more countries right now, because there are so many Karus, there are so many countries in our position asking the questions that we're asking. And it's not necessarily just about fracking. It's, as Salim said, trying to contextualize fracking into the broader discussion, the broader economic and environment nexus that the world is facing. To answer your question, the film, we're embarking on a Karoo roadshow from the 9th to the 15th of July, taking the film to those who deserve it most, who need the information soonest. And from there, we're going to the Durban International Film Festival on the 18th and the 20th July. And thereafter, there's a TV version that's being released on national television. And then we're arranging further independent national screenings across the country.
Fantastic. You've done a great job with this documentary, much needed, and hopefully it'll play that role of informing and also entertaining people a little bit. Thank you for joining us. Before I let you go, Salim, just tell me quickly and tell the viewers out there, how much gas is available in the Karoo, and will it add the 3 to 5 basis points onto the GDP that we hope?
So first of all, the estimates, the rough estimates, desktop estimates is about 480 trillion cubic feet. Now, that's a vast resource. But recent work being done by geologists and the Petroleum Agency say that estimate has to be downgraded to around 40 to 70 trillion cubic feet. Even then, it's quite vast, because if you look at Mozambique, for instance, there's about 100 trillion cubic feet just off the east coast. We're still a long way from extracting the resource. We're 10, 15 years away from that.
Yeah.
In between, we still have to grow the economy. We still have to create good economic policy. So lots of things have to be done. So I would say that at this point in time, we can't say it's a game changer. We have to wait and see.
It's not the magic bullet. We have to create
Absolutely.
a framework around it for it to make a contribution, or make the contribution that we hope
and
it can
the
make.
debate about how the resource is mined, how the wealth is generated, and who it goes to will remain an ongoing debate for the next 10, 15 years.
That's always the debate, Salim, unfortunately. Thank you very much for joining us. What a lively discussion it was. I hope that we bring you back at some point in the future to talk about this again, because I'm sure it's going to become a bigger and bigger conversation as time goes by.
Great to be on the show. Thanks.
Thank you. That is Salim Fakir, the head of the Living Planet unit at the World Wildlife Fund here in South Africa. Now, my director, Mzama, has just told me that this is where we ended. We have to go to court because, the acoustics experts are on the stand today, and they will tell us whether the neighbours could or could not hear from 177 metres away. I'm quite convinced in the middle of the night I'd be able to hear. There we go. Gerenel.